Welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy Presents the NBA Fantasy Baller DFS edition. This for Saturday, March 4th, 2017. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter edition. I'm in a little bit of a rush. I hate to do it to you guys, but I got up late and I have a ton to do. So I'm going to kind of just throw out FanDuel pricing, but I did in my research last night as I was doing this, make sure that it was close to where the prices were at on DraftKings and FantasyDraft. It's tough to offer a piece of advice for one site if the player's $1,300 different on the other. And that's specifically FanDuel to DraftKings because FantasyDraft has their own pricing. Last night was reasonable. If you stuck with our core three plays, you probably did okay. I can assure you that I had a pretty good deal of Russell Westbrook with Dario Saric, with Rudy Gobert. If you played Westbrook, he did exactly like we said he was going to do. It was a high-tempo matchup. He was over 80. I think he finished around 85 DraftKings points, 82 FanDuel points. That's a huge outing. Dario Saric finished 38 on FanDuel, a little bit over 40, maybe 42, 43 on DraftKings. And Gobert, this was just one of those variance games. When I saw that Favors was doing as well as he did, I tuned in a little bit to see how, was he just being really bad at what he does? And that certainly was part of it. The other part of it, though, was that the Jazz were being really bold with how they were playing basketball. They were passing very poorly. Even though they won, there were a number of times where Gobert was just open in the paint with no one around him, and they just would rather shoot threes or pass the ball around and just couldn't really facilitate to him the rebounds. He'd be under the hoop with Favors. They would just bounce in Favors' direction, and you're going to have those kind of nights. It didn't kill me because I had Allen Williams, who is one of our top value plays, around him a lot. So it was one of those nights where, it could have been better, had a lot of Bazemore, which really worked out. But it's on to tonight, and that's just how it goes. And this is kind of like the big man edition of the DFS podcast. There's no one in the high dollar range that I'm absolutely in love with, that I'm convinced that you can't do without in your lineups tonight. So a lot of my picks are going to generate around the forward position. I apologize for that. I do have one guard in there, so at least you can get a little taste of the other two positions. I'm going to start things off with Blake Griffin tonight, 9,700 on FanDuel, and he's taking on the Chicago Bulls. So let's think about this for a second. There's no one that's going to be able to play against Blake Griffin. I said this in one of our first podcasts when they played the Hornets, and you can also find it at researchfantasy.com. I can't remember what day it is. You could check the box score, the game log rather, and then compare it to the notes for our site. But there's just no one who's going to be able to guard Blake Griffin on this team. So he should be able to do whatever he wants to do. But the Clippers just look really bad. I mean, really, really bad. Milwaukee schooled them bad. And Milwaukee has been pretty bad themselves. So is there some concern on my end? I don't really think so. It's a second night of a back-to-back for them. Chicago's rested. I'm not a fan of what I see in Chicago right now as it is, so I think they should be able to get what they need to get done and have themselves a good night. Moving on from there, Nikola Jokic against the aforementioned Charlotte Hornets, 9,900 on FanDuel. I believe he's a little less on DraftKings. And yeah, this is the same thing that went through my mind with Blake. Frank Kaminsky's out, so you're going to have Cody Zeller in there, who I'm guessing is not going to be getting full minutes. And Marvin Williams. So are you that concerned that Jokic isn't going to be able to just stand under the hoop and every time his team misses, grab the board and put it back? This is one of those 50 to 65 point outings that I can just smell coming for Jokic. It's tough because his team's healthy and they like to score and they can all score. So it's a good thing if you're a fan of the team, bad thing if you're a fantasy player, because one of their players can catch heat and it's basically lights out for the rest of the lineup. I don't see that happening. I see this being a pretty tightly contested game, even though Charlotte themselves is not very good as it is. So he's on my radar. But by all means, the best play of the day, at least when it comes to a point per dollar perspective, is going to be Jusuf Nurkic of the Portland Trail Blazers. 64 on FanDuel. I think he's 67 on DraftKings, and he's going to be the one to feast on the Brooklyn Nets tonight. I mean, look, we said that about Gobert. It backfired. We said that about Willie Cauley-Stein the other night, and it was as bad as it could have possibly got for him. And I almost want to say that Nurkic won't fall into that same lump, because when you look around the lineup for Portland, it's Myers Leonard, it's Jake Layman, it's really nobody else worth note. I mean, it's a bunch of guys who aren't really going to be able to steal that much time from Nurkic unless he gets in foul trouble. And I know that Brook Lopez is a smart player, but we've already seen Nurkic square up against guys like Steven Adams and really hold his own. So I see no reason that Nurk shouldn't be able to put up a 35-point game. And quite frankly, that's really all you're looking to get from him at this price. So he's going to be my top play of the day. Let's just throw out two guards I like, because I do feel bad just kind of leaving you guys hanging in this situation. I don't mind Walker. I don't mind Lillard. Both of these guys are in plus matchups. Denver, the biggest way to get through them is through the guard position, point guard position especially. Brooklyn's just awful at everything. So I think you can do, and just look at what George Hill put together yesterday. He put up a monster of a game at low ownership against them. And I know Dame's price has come up, but he's getting a lot more. He's playing a lot better with Nurk on the floor. I think Kyrie will be a popular option after a 60-point game last night. I'd be hesitant to go that route this quick. He hasn't consistently done that. I also don't mind Tyler Johnson. He's more of a punt play. He gets minutes, but I think this matchup against Cleveland, if Johnson is on the floor and he's doing a lot of the shooting guard duties when Dragic is on the floor, Cleveland has a really, really big problem with that. Waiters didn't look good yesterday, and he's been slumping. And then finally, I would toss out Malcolm Brogdon, who's looked pretty bad, to be quite honest with you, until it gets to junk time in his starting duties. But I think there's merit. Toronto's been really easy to target with Kyle Lowry off the floor. Corey Joseph just does not play the type of defense that's necessary to stop decent, even point guards. My value plays are going to start with Bobby Portis tonight, 4,400 on FanDuel. I think he's 52 on DraftKings, and a lot of people are going to look at that and say, you're making a mistake. He's an unproven player, and he's going up against Blake Griffin, and that can mean fouls. And I get that, and he was just going up with Draymond Green and did fine for himself. And I'm not necessarily saying that Blake and Draymond are anywhere near the same type of player, but Draymond's pretty physical, and Bobby Portis held his own. So I can see Portis at that price having another 25 to 30-point outing. I think he's going to be another popular play because it's 7 games. And a lot of these teams just don't have the type of value options on their roster that can end up really turning out strong fantasy performances. Let's move to an actual guard now, since we've just inundated you with forwards and centers. And let's go with Gary Harris, 5,400. I think he's maybe 56 on DraftKings for the Denver Nuggets. He's been pretty solid. He's getting minutes in the early to mid-30s. I think this is going to be a competitive game tonight. I know that I might be crazy. I think a lot of people might think that Charlotte's just going to get blown out. Something tells me that, I'm trying to hide my Hornet. I'm not a homer. This is actually like a throwback to the 92 Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning Hornets. I think they're going to hang in there, and I think that could be a lot of value for Harris. You could see him go over that 30-point mark. Good for the three-point sites because he's good at hitting that, and he's bound to get some steals and minimize turnovers as well. Finally, Khris Middleton, 5,400 on FanDuel. I don't think he's too much more than that on DraftKings. And he's the big question mark tonight because he's not been playing in back-to-back sets, but he wants to play tonight. And you'd have to assume at some point Jason Kidd is going to say, all right, you can go for it. 5,400 on FanDuel. I think he might be 6, but he might be a little under that on DraftKings. He had value at halftime. So even if he's unlikely to get 30 minutes and he's only going to get 25 minutes tonight or something like that, I'm still fine with rolling him out there because I just don't think you're going to see that value anywhere else. And, when you're talking about the Raptors, I think that's a matchup with how they're situated right now that he should be able to take advantage of, regardless of what position he's playing on the floor. Let me throw an extra one out there just because I don't want to leave you with only two value plays if Middleton doesn't end up seeing the floor tonight. So let's go with Mo Harkless, 4,800. Let's go back to that Brooklyn-Portland game. He's getting minutes again in the early to mid-30s, sometimes the late, depending on his quality of play. He's good for some threes. He's good for some rebounds. He's good for some blocks and steals. He's not going to turn the ball over too much. 4,800 on FanDuel, 5,200 on DraftKings. I think he's well within range of being able to put up a 25-point fantasy outing. So these are some great pieces that you could build your lineups around tonight. That's all for today. Make sure to subscribe to our series. I'll be putting out more and more content across all sports. I know it's just NBA right now, but if you haven't noticed, I'm the only one doing this. I'm going to get my office situation. This is not an office. This is a kitchen table and a window and some Christmas decorations still on the window. I'm almost done. I'm going to put one of my rooms together so this actually looks nice. Head over to researchfantasy.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Research and Win, and we'll see you tomorrow with more NBA DFS picks.